Hello. This past weekend, my whole family and I attended the Kingdom Fellowship West conference. We spent probably about 40 hours traveling total, getting there and then coming back. And I will say, I think it was worth it. In this video, I'm going to talk about 4 highlights from our time there. And then at the end, I'll also talk about the Kingdom Fellowship conferences in general and who they attract. And maybe if you're not familiar with them, maybe that would give you an idea if this is something that you want to go to. So, first of all, the conference was held in Lebanon, Oregon at Camp Tadmor. Basically, the organizers rent out a big portion of a campground. So you can either do tent camping, sleep in cabins, or bring your RV. And then we do, and the conference is a mix of teachings, small groups, sharing meals together. There's a dining hall that we will get the meals from, and just spending time together. So the first highlight I want to talk about is the teaching time. That is definitely one of the main things that occurs there. And there were several main sessions. The teachers who taught this year were Dean Taylor. He gave, I think, 3 lectures or sermons. And Gary Miller from Idaho, Luke Miller from Utah, and I don't know who gave the first talk, and I think I missed a big part of that. There was also like a panel discussion of 4 different men from different congregations and a women's time that was taught by Tanya Taylor. So overall, I definitely enjoyed the teaching. It is so much. So I would say for me, for sure, probably for many people, I think note taking is really important to try to, if you're going to remember anything, because I would notice how I would really enjoy a talk, but then there's another talk right after, and everything just starts to blur together. So note taking is especially helpful to jog your memory on what points there were that you really did like, so that won't get lost. For me, one of the highlights was one of the speakers, Jason Lagaluso. I had been part of a home fellowship that he led, a very small home fellowship. And so it was really neat to see him teach in a bigger arena. And I guess I would just say, just seeing a friend do well was really good for me. It made me happy. And I think he did a really good job on both messages. I think they were 2 of the best messages I've seen him give. One that was actually really neat was he did a children's message, and he basically made it very child friendly, using the story of Abraham and the sacrifice of Isaac, or almost sacrifice, and showing the different imagery or metaphors or things that pointed to Jesus in a very kid-friendly way. And I think it was a really nice introduction to seeing Jesus in the Old Testament, even if it's not an explicit prophecy, just seeing those pictures. So I thought that was great, and hopefully the children had their interest sparked in trying to do that themselves, maybe with some other Bible stories. Gary Miller was also, I really enjoyed the talk he gave. I just felt like he is a very precise thinker. And so I enjoyed that precision throughout his talk. I think I had written down a few notes of certain things he said that I just enjoyed, and I'm not able to find it right now. But he recommended several books I'm interested in reading today. Once I get through the halfway books are all over my bookshelves. He recommended, I think it was Temporal Rise and Join the Modern Self. I actually didn't think of it. So maybe that's what I'm not sure about. But he had this very interesting diagram where it was like showing the different spectrums of churches, and how there tends to be a spectrum where some churches are really great on evangelism, and then there's, on the other end, churches that are not so great on that, churches that are very, very committed to each other, and they're more like a church family versus on the other end, where it's a family church, where the family kind of comes in almost in a consumeristic way, seeing what's in it for us. What can I get out of this place? And he's talking a lot about these different tendencies and how some of the churches that are very, sometimes they can be so strong on the church family and the commitment to each other, but then very weak on the outreach. And then vice versa, sometimes these churches that aren't as stable in their own community can be great on bringing people in. So I think through that talk, there was just exploration of those ideas. And obviously, the goal is that the churches can, in general, be strong on both ends, on being a community and being a stable, very strong community, helping each other, discipling each other, but also being able to reach a broader culture and be welcoming to visitors, and ultimately making new disciples from outside of the families who are already part of it. So I thought he made some really good points. That was good, very good to listen to. And then Dean Taylor's talk, I think he was a really engaging speaker. I liked the different imagery that he would use on the screen, and I enjoyed how I've listened to him so much on the internet, from some of the talks he's given and some of the messages on historic faith. So it was just really cool to hear someone who has been part of my thought life, to be part of that learning live in person. And also really cool to know that because of his story of leaving the military and some of the ways he teaches about the Christian perspective on loving your enemies and not being involved in killing them, he's been so influential. And so it was neat for me to be in that room and realize I knew at least one person who did leave a career in the military, and some of Dean's um, writing and teaching was a part of his decision. So these things that Dean is sharing and speaking, it's changing people's lives, and I think it's for the good. And it's exciting to be part of that more closely. I also enjoyed the women's teaching time with his wife Tanya Taylor. I found her to be just very personable, very friendly, humble. And also, I think she made some good points. Her talk was about the feminine influence in the church, or building God's kingdom through feminine influence. And one of the points that she made that really stuck in my mind was just this idea of, like, do we really think there's an enemy pursuing us? Are we really taking that seriously? And she had thrown out something like if you knew someone wanted to hurt you, or you had an enemy wanting to kill you, what would you do differently? And that stuck with me. And obviously the implication is, like, we have an enemy, and it's a spiritual battle. So are we being vigilant just like someone would be if they knew someone was physically after them? And so the next morning, I thought about that in the morning, like before I went out of my tent. I thought, if there was a sniper, if I knew there was a sniper out there wanting to shoot me when I got out of my tent, in a worldly sense, what would I do? Like, I would probably do a lot of things. I think about all the preparation the president has to do, because obviously people want to kill him. And so it's not like he just stays in one place and shelters and never goes anywhere. But when he does go somewhere, he has his Secret Service scouting out area. There's intelligence. There's armed, armed people guarding him. There's a carefulness there. And so then he's able to move about more freely and still be safe. And so when I was in my tent, I really had that in my mind. And so I just thought, well, so our enemy seeks to steal and kill and destroy our faith, our lives, our relationships, our families, our church communities. So if one of the weapons of spiritual warfare is prayer, then thinking of it in that way, like speaking protection against or against the plans of the enemy. It's just a really good way to think about it. It made me pray with a lot more focus, and also feel like being specific in prayer was really doing something. And also there's fasting and teaching, preaching, rebuking, all these other things that are spiritual that can be used. And that picture was really great for me. I appreciated that she shared that. And then the the next point I wanted to talk about was the relationships and how positive that was. I'm at the point now where this is the second time we've gone up there. We've often shared about this event with friends and met people last year. And so coming into it this year, this is my third Kingdom conference altogether. It's just really cool because I know people and it's nice to reconnect. And there's already a, a connection there that's just getting better. And it really blesses me to see my children also just enjoying to get together with friends who they don't see as often. Maybe sometimes it's just twice a year or a few times or several times throughout the year, but they're not seeing each other every week. So there is an enthusiasm and excitement to be together. And then throughout the weekend, just more connections are happening, whether it's meeting somebody in the small group or just chatting at the table together during a meal. And so that is very positive. I hope that continues. And there's such a sense of just excitement to meet each other. And it is really, at least in my experience, like pronounced, like people want to get to know you. Where are you from? Hear about your background. And there's just like an openness in general where most people do want to meet others who are there. And it felt funny because I went to Walmart back home. I had to get some things at the grocery store last night. And so it's not fair, right? Because nobody's going to Walmart to meet people necessarily. But yeah, just the coldness or lack of enthusiasm to see other people, it felt like such a contrast. So these conferences are just so fun in that way, at least for me. And then the third highlight for me was just the physical nature of the time there. So I try to be active, and my goal for steps is like 10,000 to maybe 12,000 a day. And so the first day I was there, I have a Fitbit, and it was just funny. I mean, I was at 16,000 steps and the sun hadn't even set yet. So just all the walking back and forth through the camp, going up for the teachings, or just taking my children to use the bathroom. There was just a lot of nice activity. And then if you want to eat healthy, you can. The meals are prepared by a family I know they were the main organizers of that and cooks, but then definitely they had help. And so what they put together was just, I thought it was great. There was variety. There was a lot of options where you could split up what you wanted to put together, like with tacos or a salad or something like that. And so if you wanted to eat like a high protein, low carb, fruits and veggies kind of diet, you really can there. And if you wanted to eat some more treats and fun stuff, you can too, but not to the extreme. Like I noticed most of the desserts would be something that someone obviously had made homemade. So that's nice. You're getting less junk. And there were no other drinks served except for water and coffee. So, you're not having to think too much about your children drinking a lot of soda or you drinking a lot of soda or something like that. And so it was just a lot of variety. And I actually was able to keep up with a general goal I have of not eating too many carbs and trying to get enough protein in. I did have some treats, but in general, I really stayed on track. And it was odd for me though, when the day I came back, then I just started stuffing my face. And so I think I actually lost a pound or two while I was there, but I think I gained it all back the next day. So after coming home, just being in nature is great. And my hands felt so good after the first day. I have pretty consistent numbness and tingling in my hands. Sometimes it goes down to my feet. I think it's definitely carpal tunnel related. So while I did have access to my phone and some data while I was there, there was so many other good options for me to choose to do with my time that I wasn't on my phone very much, and I could feel a difference in that. So how do you keep that going back in normal life where I have to use my phone for banking and groceries and different things like that? I don't know, but it was nice to see such a dramatic change in the way my hands felt in such a short amount of time. So, the last thing I wanted to touch on, or a highlight for me, is where this all is going. And I think it's going in a really good direction. And what I mean is this kingdom oriented faith where some of the main, I think some of the main things that distinguish it from other expressions of Christianity are things like a commitment to just really trying to take Jesus at his words and apply those teachings to your life in this life, to not over spiritualize what he says, but to focus more on, okay, how do we live this out? How do we live this out as a community? And then, especially with things like not killing our enemies, not seeking political power to then rule over other people and force them to live like Christians, and some applications of modesty and the roles in the church with male leadership and how that also works in a family, the prayer veiling, these different things that have become significant parts of this kingdom Christian or Anabaptist expression of Christianity. I think these types of conferences where people who have a lot in common, but not everything in common, are still willing to come together, and they're excited to come together. They're excited to have relationships with each other and talk and be together. I think it's really good. And I just think that I hope some of those strengths of those long established Anabaptist church communities like the Mennonites and some of the real strengths they have, that those can be brought out and shared with people often from Protestant backgrounds, who then are now trying to apply this new way of looking at Christianity, and maybe the strengths that they had before was like openness and bringing friends along and sharing these ideas with others and evangelism, like that these two groups or tendencies can share the best of what they have with each other, and the end result can just overall be more powerful, balanced church communities. I just hope people keep talking. During the panel where there were 4 men on stage, they were, or maybe 5, Clinton Noss, Roger Hertzler, Luke Miller, Willard Kaufman, and Gary Miller, where they were talking about different questions about how churches can edify each other. And I forget exactly what I was doing, but I was mostly busy with a child or two at this point. But what I did hear at one point when someone asked, well, what can your churches do to edify each other like different churches? And I think an assumption there was that there is a lot of distance between these churches. Like sometimes they don't want to work very closely together, or maybe there's a slowness or hesitancy about that. And I think it was Roger Hertzler who said something like, well, like we're doing it right now. We're all sitting on the stage together, talking through these issues, like right now. And I thought that was exactly a great point. Like just being willing to sit and talk to each other, even if some church community does things a little different. Yes, I think that's exactly a really good place to be. It's a powerful place to be. And I just hope it all continues. And so overall, good times, glad I went. And even with all the mishaps that come in with traveling with a bunch of people and children and camping, we did the tent camping option. That's a whole nother story. And just the things that come up, the forgotten items. I actually had left my glasses at home, so I couldn't see indoors most of the time. I could see with prescription sunglasses. But anyway, just a lot of different things that weren't planned. And, I dealt with vomit and pee, not my own vomit, but that's just what happens sometimes with traveling and children. So all that though, I think it was definitely worth it. I think just the encouragement and feeling like part of a broader community or movement or whatever you want to call it, I think that was worth going. And so for my last point though, in case you weren't familiar, I did want to touch on who this conference draws and also the Kingdom Fellowship weekend that happens on the East Coast. So a lot of the people who come are from traditional Anabaptist backgrounds and they were raised that way, like whether it's Mennonite. More on the East Coast, you'll get some Amish people, but there are different conferences represented. But so these are individuals who are raised in this way of understanding Christianity, and sometimes they might have switched from one church to another or one conference to another, but they have that history there, and I think they bring a lot of strengths to a conference like this. And then also you'll have people who have often come from what I found, like a Protestant background, and then through the years they would read the scriptures and then they realize that there's like a disconnect between what was often taught in their churches, especially the emphasis on the justification by faith alone, and just this overemphasis on, well, you're saved by grace, and it's just about believing in Jesus' death on the cross for your sins, and not so much about applying all these very specific teachings from Jesus and from the letters, and it just doesn't seem to make sense. And so I found that over and over again, so many people have David Berceau's books or sermons or lectures, whatever he calls them, and they listen to those, and the way he breaks down like what the early Christians thought in general about certain topics, it's just such a refreshing, sometimes jarring experience for them, because then when they look back at the scriptures, they realize, oh, like that interpretation makes a lot more sense than what I'm hearing at my local church. And they go through, in a way, it's kind of a reconstructing or deconstructing, but they make significant changes. And often the main changes are things like loving your enemies instead of being willing to go kill them. More separation of the world, like a withdrawal from certain types of entertainment or activities. Often there will be a greater degree of modesty. And so these things add up to them then feeling very out of place where they're at. And so they don't know what to do. Like, do you just stay where you're at and feel kind of like an oddball? And sometimes, they're getting scrutinized by leadership or other Christians, like, hey, why are you doing this? Or why are you taking things so serious? And there's some criticism there. So, and then there's that point, okay, well, what do I do next? And so sometimes these people will try to up and move and join a different church, or they're just looking for encouragement. So these conferences are a great way of giving at least a time where you aren't the only person who sees things a certain way. And there's like you often start from a very similar place with others, at least in some of these major beliefs. And it's just a really encouraging time. And then I think it is really thrilling to kind of see, the teachings you're learning, but they're still just like, it's coming from a similar foundation. And then there's just more connections that you can make, or you learn about opportunities to go do some kind of service or missions work that is really more aligned with where you're at. And so I see that in the people who I meet who come to these things who don't come from an Anabaptist background and would maybe just try to call themselves Christian or Kingdom Christian or whatever. And I know a lot of people don't want to use labels, and that's fine too, but I'm just trying to explain some of the groups that these conferences draw in. And so far, I think it's going really well. Like, I think there's just a lot of positive sharing that I've seen for the most part. And I really hope that God uses these conferences to just, I guess, have his will be done in a more effective way, have more truth shown, and just build more positive community, even if sometimes it's long distance, but there's still that desire that people have to come together. And so that's just an encouraging thing to see too. Like, people are flying in or driving long distances, taking time out to pursue this type of edification, fellowship, connection. So I hope it happens next year. And maybe I'll put a link in the info spot on this video if you want to check out more and maybe sign up if they do one next year. God bless you. Bye.